Why is the Cormac McCarthy community predominantly men? Because here I am, and over 99% of you guys watching right now are men. And the easy answer is to say that McCarthy's novels feature very few female protagonists, and when they do, they are weak. But why, when we look at other authors such as Haruki Murakami, Ernest Hemingway, and other classic authors who also have very few strong female characters, why do they have such a large female readership? Because more females are reading than ever, actually more so than males. And so when you look at a literary giant like a Cormac McCarthy, you would think that he would have at least a decent size of female readership within his audience. So this presentation, you guys, isn't going to be a red pill. I'm so sorry. But it's rather going to be a forest green pill. Because to get to the heart of this question, we have to examine malignant masculinity, which McCarthy loves to toy with. And of course, all throughout time, women have been pinned as the irrational and emotional gender that's always screwing things up. But when we observe the history and literature of the West, its massive, violent vibrations are rooted in petty, jealous, and aggressive men who aren't at peace with themselves. Doesn't matter what part of history you go to, it is men making the irrational decisions through a lens of rationality. And I'd like to think that we have evolved, everyone. But when I look at myself and all my fellow lit bros out there, we collectively have more complexes, psychic, mental, physical, than previous generations. We are not solving these problems of irrationality. And when we look back with hindsight and with technology and Wikipedia to give us a rundown, we're like, man, all those people were so dumb, but we are also that dumb. And this presentation, you guys, don't get it twisted, is not some, oh, boo-hoo-hoo, men are so bad. No, but we as men have been overridden with irony, feminization, trolling complexes, logical insanity, and all of that is preventing us from being able to connect with different modes of consciousness. Most of the time, we're pigeonholed into one or two aspects of reality and told to use our phallic energy because that's the axiomatic phallic energy. It's just a one and done, just straight ahead. But I hope that we can all transcend those axiomatic desires and become something more than just barbaric men who are slaves to the phallic energy. And so the first reason we love, you and I, Cormac McCarthy, is that we are all a little bit suspicious, everyone. We got to turn down the lights of this, of all that Proustian bullshit and diversity literature that has been getting shoved down our throats for the last, 60 to 70 years. And I will admit, I've read all of Proust's works. I love that stream of consciousness, crazy stuff. I love all the diverse voices. I've read it all. But when I look at Mr. Cormac McCarthy and his novels, he features little to no interiority. And outside of Stella Maris and The Passenger, which features very little actually too, that's what makes it so suspenseful. In those novels, you're like, oh my God, Bobby and Alicia, please tell me something. How does it feel to love your sister? But we never get that. But outside those two novels and maybe some of his screenplays, we get almost no interiority with any of his characters. And when we combine all this together, so we have no interiority, we have McCarthy's deep focus on nature, we have his aggressive infernal prose with, that we all love. And that all is compounded by McCarthy's reclusiveness. It manifests a malignant man's paradise. Like, holy hell, people talk about Hemingway's iceberg theory, but McCarthy's icebergness is about 100 times bigger. And when we look at the Eros and Psyche myth in Greek mythology, Eros doesn't allow Psyche to see him when they first get together, because the ideal reality for the malignant man's consciousness is one where women are perfect little sex dolls and offer no pushback. They have no voice. They have no real place in a man's consciousness. But what ends up happening in the myth is that Psyche eventually uses the light to shine it on Eros. And that's what women are to men. This is like, classic Jungian psychology, that women, when they shine their light upon us, can show us our godhood, and help us start to explore and understand our true self and our emotions. But of course, because of our complexities, men love to pull. And I know some Cormac McCarthy fans who are my, IRL friends, and they are the biggest proponents of, I don't know how to express myself. My dad was a jerk to me. We never hugged each other. I just don't know how to talk about my emotions. So that's why I drink beer every night and watch football and and yada, yada, yada. But this is an obvious displacement of energy. When guys do this, they are not confronting the actual matter at hand. And when we look at Cormac McCarthy's characters, they love to do this. Let's not get it twisted. I love a good Western story as much as everyone else. But you can find peace without prostitutes. John Grady Cole, I'm talking to your dumbass right now. You can find love without necrophilia. Lester Ballard. You can find someone else to get pregnant other than your sister, Cola. And what's also crazy about his characters is that none of them are like beautiful men, right? When we look at all these different guys, they are not, you maybe say John Grady Cole is, but they're not heart stoppers. John, and what's crazy about All the Pretty Horses is that's the book that threw him over the edge, because John Grady Cole does kind of have these over exaggerated qualities. Like, he does seem like he is kind of smooth with his words. He can tame all these horses. He has the magic. And Alejandra in that story does have some complexity, and that book has really one of the only love scenes in all of his novels, which is kind of a sub point that I'll just make right now. Is that's one of the reasons I think that most females don't really feel connected to the readership, because when we look at what females mostly read, romance, fantasy, and whatnot, those are very heavy in the romance, including fan fiction. There is a niche market out there for Bigfoot erotica, and it's mostly women filling that niche. And so when we look at how McCarthy deals with sexuality, like in Outer Dark, how he describes the birth and how Cola deals with his sister and her feeling weird, it's kind of grotesque, disconnected, and disgusting. And that's because it's from the POV of these types of characters. Men in the 1940s in Knoxville, Tennessee, aren't practicing tantric sex. They're not becoming multi-orgasmic men. They don't even know what an orgasm is. It just happens to them. And when we look at McCarthy as a man, shout out Mr. Cormac McCarthy. If you guys want a t-shirt, go check out all of them. Link down in the description below. A bunch of new ones are coming out. I think I have like 30 or 40 new designs, different materials, hoodies, long sleeve shirts. I'm unveiling a whole line this week, so get ready for that. But when we look at McCarthy and who he was this guy. He was the detached man who was the artiste. I'm sure he did say, we've all pulled this before if you're a man, I just don't know how to express myself. I remember when I was in college, I was in like kind of a friends with benefits scenario, and she was trying to take it like to marriage almost immediately, and I was like drowning and like, I can't, I was making up every single trauma that I could think of. But this is McCarthy when he's telling his wife, when she has a child, go get a second job so I can get another $3,000 for writing another book. This is McCarthy every single day with his second wife, who was very well educated and saw something in McCarthy saying like, no, we're going to live here in this stone house forever. And I don't care if anyone buys my work, and we're dirt poor and have no food and have no toothpaste. So McCarthy knows how to write in this style. And I think obviously he evolved out of this. I think that when he moved west and got out of his second marriage, as I've talked about many different times on this program, he had like an evolution. I think that maybe even psychedelics and other stuff were involved in that time. I think there was a sexual, a natural, and other types of like expansions that were going on for him at that time. But he knows how to write these characters. And going back to that original point about McCarthy's characters don't look very good, they don't have any of these big qualities, it's just a simple psychology 101, like kind of reverse projection, that there are characters that are better than us. then it's harder for us to connect with them. But when there is no interiority, when they look worse than us, they don't have like all the same abilities in us, then we can dump ourselves on them, and we like that. When I think of John Grady Cole, I think of like I put my thoughts in him and how I would be feeling, and I go on the journey as, Ian, but with him. So I think that's like a good piece of advice for writing. Like when you can create these complex characters, you have to also balance them out with negativity. Like when you look at Infinite Jest, like one of the main characters in that novel, Hal, he's this great tennis player and he's very smart, but he has like he's a drug addict and has like massive communication issues. There's like a lot more negatives than positives. And so that makes it easier, like, oh, okay, to connect. I was thinking about this the other day. I was, thinking about movies and TV shows. I'm like, a lot of the best ones, the main protagonists aren't that beautiful. Like a lot of the men that are featured, like Tony Soprano, even though he is just, as an actor, very, very good. They could have found someone just as good who looked different, but they tried to create that unattractive vibe. And with, I don't know, does anyone know what this technique's called? Maybe it's just authenticity, but let's move on to point number 2, which is the topics. And obviously, like, I don't want to be too black and white. There's obviously women out there who like nature, who like the road and the rambling aspects of Cormac McCarthy's topics. But that lost world, that lost freedom, is something that we have this hole in our heart. Right now in my English classes, I'm teaching John Krakauer's book, Into the Wild, because that is, with Chris McCandless, that shows the displacement of energy that males feel. I had this when I dropped out of college and moved to Oregon and was hitchhiking around, and me and my buddy Russ, he also had this energy, and he ended up dying in a ski accident that was 100% preventable because of his ego, because of this yearning and the searching and this energy that all the characters of McCarthy feel. And McCarthy really likes to focus on this topic. It's not about the loss of civilization and the oncoming technology, but it is about the loss of adventure and wonder and all of that stuff that comes with that. And how do we cope with that? Where do we find that when it's harder to find that in this reality because of cars and barbed wire, nuclear bombs and capitalism and all this other stuff? And as I said before, you can always find it internally and like take the whole yogic route. But I knew that when I was 14 years old, but I said, I want to feel this. I want to experience it. So I went out and, hurt myself mentally and physically and came close to death so many times and risked everything, and people around me were dying. So many people didn't make it on the journey with me because we were all searching for that. That's why men get into drugs. That's why men commit suicide more. And McCarthy seems to come to a peace with this. And maybe that drive, though, is what pulled him out, because when he left his second wife, he did ride on horseback and traveled around all these areas in Mexico, New Mexico, Texas, Arizona, and whatnot, and was rambling. He did experience that aspect. So when we look at his like first 4 novels, a lot of the characters are like feeling like that and trying to tap into that. And that's probably akin to what McCarthy was trying to tap into. And then when we move past that with Blood Meridian, that's kind of a standalone novel, but then the Border Trilogy is him returning to that idea, but with much more simplicity and adding adolescence in, because when we look at his first 4 novels, most of the protagonists are men outside of John Wesley Ratner in The Orchard Keeper, but The Orchard Keeper also features 2 other protagonists. I also think that women aren't really favorable, don't really tap into Cormac very well, because he is the classic man's man as much as we want to deny that. Men in his reality, they drink. They are not politically correct. They are jerks to women and use them and leave them. And I think that's okay because that's reality. And I think that men have to move through these feelings. You can't just go, as if you've ever watched a man go from, feeling this and then suddenly he's a reformed man and feminism and like all these other random things. When you watch a man that skipped the rambling part and didn't integrate these aspects and actually feel these things out, it's deep down in there. And that's why those kind of guys creep me out a lot of the time, because we do have a genetic disposition to adventure, to this deep purpose. And it's much different than that of women's deep purpose. We both, at an axiomatic level, most of the time, have 2 different modes of fulfillment and reality. And like I said, if you can escape that. After a while, you can start climbing above that, and that should be the goal of everyone. And then when you're up there, you're existing as the enlightened class. But McCarthy showed me that bridge. He showed me that if I go out in nature, if I become simplistic, if I don't worry about money, if I take time to do all this that I watched his characters do, it will help me. And that's what happened with McCarthy. He got into science. He's hanging out at the Santa Fe Institute and going to these parties with Nobel Prize winners and like all the stuff. Like he completed the journey. He had a child. And like when you listen to his the interview with John Krakauer at SFI, you see a man who's very well-rounded. But when he leaves that day, he drives his truck. He has a border collie. You know, he is a man's man nonetheless. And so I think that also, you know, of course, but women obviously can connect with this. Like this is a huge part of history, but there are less and less women who view this as a good thing. Women want men to go from A to B. We're born with these problems, bad man, and now you need to be the reformed man. And that whole journey causes problems because guess who gets the bad end of it? Women. You know, there are women in my past who I have burned who, because of this mentality, ended up brokenhearted, and you know there was no logical reason because of that. They didn't see the journey I was on or could really understand it. And there are so many women out there who have experienced this, and at worse levels, you know, sometimes when men do this, if they are very malignant, they are domestic abusers. They, you know, are on drugs. Like this can get very dark really fast. And that also happens, you know. And so I can see the negative connotations of kind of pushing this mentality because women have to be hurt. As bad as it sounds, well, they don't have to be, but until we understand this more and have more pathways, which we have gotten rid of all of them, the initiation rites, the mentality, us talking about it as men without dogma, without religion, because now everything is like red pill. Every man has to be red pilled now. All the masculinity groups that are being revived right now are utter BS. They're like Christianity, or like, you know, when we look at the mythopoetic movement that was big in the 90s with the author Robert Bly and his book Iron John. This is the pinnacle of the masculinity movement right here. You should read this book, Iron John, if you haven't already. Look at Robert Bly's work. Look at his poetry. He was one of the best poets and most influential poets in American, you could even say world history of, you know, we could say of the 20th century. And at the end of his life, he turned solely to men's issues and creating a mythopoetic men's group. I have a bunch of videos on this earlier in the channel. I'll link some down in the description below. But those groups, from my estimation, were actually making real change. But people don't want real change. People want to be a part of that cult. People want all that weird stuff and to not actually move the energy. And everything that's happening now in the men's movement that is addressing these issues is absolutely terrible, because one half of it its masculinity has been abolished, and then the other half has commodified it and like roped it into like all these other wacky philosophies that stem from dogmatic religion or like nihilistic aspects, and you can even say very misogynist aspects of reality. Because as I was talking about earlier, you know, if you go on this journey and you work on yourself, you will find a woman that will shine the light on you and everything will be fine. I don't know one man who hasn't been on this journey and completed it that hasn't found love in whatever capacity they want to find it. So everyone, why do you guys think that men are so predominantly represented in this Cormac McCarthy community? It is also true that even though women read more, they do when it comes to literary fiction, it is also very skewed, the rates between men and women. But when you look at humanities departments, there's a much higher enrollment of women than men in like English departments, and in the numbers in philosophy departments are starting to even out now too. So let me hear it. I will see you guys in the next video. Join the Cormac McCarthy course. Go buy a t-shirt if you want to support this channel, or just leave a like, leave a comment, help me boost this, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.